Welcome to Invested Souls, the podcast where real estate expertise meets relationship growth.
And we're your hosts, the Flanagans. I'm Brad.
And I'm Jamie. This podcast is your chance to learn from our experiences and follow in our footsteps. Whether you're an entrepreneur, investor, or real estate professional, we've got the insights and strategies to help you elevate your wealth and achieve financial freedom.
But it's not just all about real estate. We believe that thriving in life means nurturing the relationships that matter most.
That's right. We'll be talking about how to balance your personal and professional life so you can create a fulfilling and prosperous future.
So join us on Invested Souls and let's grow together in wealth, relationships, and success.
Ready to elevate your life? Let's get started. Welcome to Invested Souls. All right. Welcome back. We actually had a guest today, but they rescheduled. So Brad and I thought we would hop on here, just him and I, and have a little conversation about the hot topic, since we're recording this about a week before all the changes take place in our local market with the NAR lawsuit. So I thought we would play a little bit around that, some questions for you as a lender. And I will be sharing some insight for buyer agents to be able to use in this market as we navigate this. So there is lots of confusion, and every MLS is treating this differently. And it's very interesting because the opinions can go every different way, within the real estate community even. So some real estate agents are like, well, should the seller pay buyer agent commission? And then, there's an MLS that just came out, the Northwest MLS, Washington. At this point in time, they are not taking part of the settlement. They are going to continue to show compensation in their MLS, and they believe that's the seller should be able to market that as part of marketing their listing. So it's fascinating because our 9-year-old actually brought it up to me last week when we were talking about selling our house in Colorado. He goes, well, so you took home this much money or whatever? I was like, well, we took that much minus we paid the agent who brought us the buyer. And then I told him how much we paid her, and it was a pretty significant sale. And he was like, why did you pay her that much for selling your house? I was like, she brought the buyer. So it's kind of interesting just how this whole thing is played out. Brad was joking. I think it's funny when you say, I don't expect the restaurant to share where they got their meat from and how much they paid for it.
Well, from an efficiency standpoint, from taxpayer dollars standpoint, I have my own opinions, but at the end of the day, it is something that just, again, seems like people saw an opportunity, if you will, profit from the situation because it's a communication issue, not a commission issue.
Right, exactly.
Yes, there are bad actors in every industry. So that at the end of the day, there's a cost of doing business in every business. There's bad actors. There are people with different agendas in every industry. And so if somebody didn't communicate it and they took advantage, yes, those are the ones that needed to be directed. This needed to be directed at. However, it's now just creating more confusion, which is typically what the legislation ends up doing. We have standardized formats and disclosures throughout the process that unfortunately they deliver the information, but they're so difficult to read that it actually ends up being more confusion.
Right.
Having to send a video to a consumer every time a document comes out to help them understand just how to navigate the form. It's at a tax return. Most people don't know how to read their own tax return. That's the level. That's how they want to disclose financial information through this process. That's
right.
Bonkers.
So the next couple months is going to be, it's going to really change. There's going to be some changes. And as the consumer, there's going to be a little bit additional, and I'm freezing always.
Sorry.
There's going to be additional disclosures, and there's going to be additional documentation that gets signed before you even start working with an agent. So you used to be able to call an agent, they go show you a house. And as the consumer doesn't usually know how we get paid, it's like, oh, then they look at another house, they pull it up on Zillow, it's a different agent. They don't realize that the first agent didn't get paid to show them the house. So this is actually a really good thing from that perspective is you will choose and you will essentially sign documentation that says we're working together. And I think it's great because as a buyer's agent, you want to have that exclusive relationship. You don't go to an attorney with an issue and then go talk to another attorney. They're both working on your behalf and you don't really, nobody's communicating with each other, and then it's a mess, right?
Right.
So I actually think that there's some benefits to this, but it's going to take some getting used to. And as a buyer's agent who's negotiated really well on behalf of my clients in the past and identified opportunities where they can get it, they can essentially build equity faster, finding a fixer upper. That's one of my strengths is like, hey, where can we find opportunity? Is there a house that's been sitting on the market that hasn't been marketed correctly? And we can actually take advantage of that market time and bring an offer. So if you're listening to this and you're a buyer's agent, I would get really clear on how was my previous success with work as, there's the buyer presentations. It's like, oh, I'm going to show you houses and I'm going to get you in touch with our preferred lender, or I'm going to get you in touch. I have a list of home inspectors. That's great. But the data, just like when you go on a listing appointment, it's like, hey, my last 15 listings sold for 99% of list price or 101% of list price, depending on the market. Being able to do that same thing on the buyer side, I think is going to be really important. And being able to say, I negotiate all my deals at on average 94% of list price in a market that usually sees a 98%, but, offer to sale list price. So if you can show your buyer that, hey, I'm on average, I'm saving my clients 4% over the industry average, and you're paying me X amount. I'm not going to talk specific commissions on here because that's why this is an issue, is because people are excluding and creating compensation agreements that essentially like a price fixing thing. So that's why I'm going to avoid any specific percentages, but show your value.
And it boils down to running your business like a business.
Right.
And what I believe, if anything happens, is just that it becomes a more difficult process to navigate, which may deter a lot of professionals who weren't looking for that. They wanted just the good old relationship. Hey, you can trust me, and I'm going to open the door, and I know how to write the contract, and I'm going to give you all of the information. But now it's how do we pay attention to the data? Or you talk about creating SOPs, like measuring what you do, what it is that made you successful, looking back at certain transactions and evaluating, how did I differentiate? How did I service the client in a way that led to my value, and where could I have done better? And then, yes, quantifying it, sharing, and being able to articulate it to the consumer.
Yeah. Always, anytime you can add value, I think that's a massive opportunity just to add value to your buyer. Where from a relationship standpoint, there's all these cute things. There's so many things that you can do to add value, but creating a kid's book where it's like the parents bring their kids on the showing and you happen to have a coloring book of the local market. Or they get to pick, you print out something cute for the houses that you're going to see that day, and the kids have something to do. But those special touches, and that's not something I do. I saw somebody do that recently. This girl had a farm, and she's like, do you think I could, as a closing gift, like homemade pickles? I was like, you would be my realtor for life. But those are the things that if it's memorable and you actually build the relationship, but it's a value add piece, that person that's memorable, that's a unique thing. And so we can all we can all say we have a list of inspectors. We can't all say, I'm going to bring you and your family homemade pickles.
Which is not a quantifiable like number you can put in there, but the real estate transaction is experiential.
Yes.
And so
combine the data.
But is it going to be a good experience? Like when you go to certain service providers and they treat you like they're herding cattle versus that white glove, red carpet experience, just know that if you're the herding cattle, you're based on quantity, not quality of experience or transaction. And then if you want to be the prime steakhouse, then yes, you have the chilled fork. You have a welcoming reception area where somebody is going to feel they're important still,
for sure,
and not just standing room only.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Like the whole transactional. There are a lot of agents who get really transactional in their business as they grow. And I've struggled, we have grown. And so something that I've personally battled is where it's like, oh my gosh, we have expanded our business and we are doing more business. And how do we still keep the personal touch on those in those relationships when there are more of them? And I just like to go back to building a team. And it's been really cool to be able to build that team around that also support the relationship side of the business versus it being truly like a transactional, hey, next person, like, no, we're still doing hot buys and we're bringing a custom box to their doorstep before we go on a listing appointment. But how do we actually take that when you have a team and actually add value versus make it more transactional? Like, I don't know. I think it's this business. I think there's massive opportunity right now to overserve, and you will own the market that you're in when you overserve. And I hope that in the coming months, I know we have a lot of clients.
When you say building a team too, though, I think the shift in just the language or the concept or the vision is building a company as opposed to
Yes.
building a team. So many people get focused, or high producers get focused on attempting to scale by just diluting the compensation and delegating certain tasks and activities versus understanding the client experience, figuring out processes, and then identifying personnel that have strengths where you might be weak or may enjoy doing the things that you don't enjoy doing
Yeah.
as much.
Well, yeah. If you bring on 10 salespeople, but you have zero operation support, you aren't going to you need to offset your strengths with somebody else who actually is able to handle your weaknesses. Paperwork, I literally leave the appointment. I'm communicating everything that's in the paperwork, but I shouldn't have to go. I don't need to be entering somebody's address on a piece in the line on page 1. Like, that's a data entry thing. And I can actually serve the client at a very high level when I get to leave that appointment and focus on going back in the MLS, running comps, seeing what updates they can do to their house that's going to bring them money. So I'm actually doing a profit producing activity on behalf of my client versus going home, doing all the paperwork, getting a little frustrated, trying to do the paperwork again, getting locked out of a system. Like, my team is always in those systems. Now it's like, okay, here's the information that needs to be in the paperwork. I'm going to go and rerun comps, and then we're going to get their house on the market in the next 2 to 3 weeks. And it works really well. However, if I had just salespeople and I was if I was hand holding my client and then pulling in another salesperson, we now both have the weakness of paperwork. And so when I coach, we talk a lot about hiring a transaction coordinator as one of your very first hires, because that person can literally help you double your business without adding anything else. And it's such a cost-effective way to scale just as a single agent.
And previously we talked about just your energy and the decision fatigue. And it's
I have
like,
a lot of decision fatigue.
how do we offload the activities or the tasks, the decisions that are going to allow you to operate at the highest level or maintain the most amount of energy?
Yeah.
We would do this business to a certain degree just because we're passionate about it. So obviously there's still this high volume, and then you back yourself into a corner and you have so many responsibilities that you just have to show up and do those things. But the more that the team is built around you as a support system with the process in top of mind versus profit top of mind, I think you still end up building something that to the word serve at a higher level. And then we've always talked about the team approach, because again, I do think more collaboration has been happening since the market shift, since the lawsuit. So you're going to see just more teams, more companies, more collaboration. You identify the right people instead of just doing the whole, I get a 80-20 split and then you get a 50-50 split, and then people just start getting envy. They don't know what goes on in the back end on the operations, the general overhead. They think you're making all the money when in reality it's probably more frustrating to go from sales to management
Yeah, I mean, it was cool when Brad made me a super awesome spreadsheet. I used to have my team and I had an agent on my team. I don't remember what her split was, but it was like, hey, if I refer you a deal, it's 50-50. And if you bring your own deal, it's 80-20. And then what happens is you get to the end of the year and you're both doing a lot of business, but now you're managing another person as well. And you're answering their questions and you're involved with the client and everything. And all of a sudden you look at your numbers and it's like, gosh, I was making the same as an independent agent. Why is this? But when you look at it, the systems that you need to add in order to make sure that communication is effective, make sure that the tasks are being handled, because now you're handing stuff off. And if it's just in a text, your transaction coordinator doesn't know about it. So there's added cost. Well, Brad made me an awesome spreadsheet and it was like, oh, yeah, this model, I am. So it was like, and it doesn't feel that way. And now I've ran that spreadsheet with lots of people who are running teams. And unfortunately, they didn't realize it. They're upside down when they're comparing certain things and what brokerage and all that stuff. But really knowing your numbers and where the money is going is super important. But this lawsuit, going back to the NAR lawsuit with that, it's going to be very interesting because commission is always negotiable, right? And so we've always been transparency of how much is the buyer's agent going to get paid on this transaction. For the time being, we don't have a whole lot of that's not there. You're negotiating your commission essentially every time you show a home. It's going with the offer and depending on your market. And so now it is like, as a team lead, I have to look at, okay, well, if we are getting the X commission as a buyer's agent on this transaction, but we're getting X amount, we don't have any data to say this is what I'm going to base my spreadsheet off of. We've got zero data. We know what the past has been. Is that going to be the future? We don't know. So there's going to be some interesting things as you talk about running a company in this new market too.
Well, and the agents that do high production from a listing standpoint, think about if you can't advertise as to what the commission is via the MLS, you have to have a plan for how you're going to advertise that information. Otherwise, the number of phone calls that you get that says, are you paying a commission on this house?
Yep.
Like that'll be one of the questions that agents want to know before they schedule the showing.
Now. They're saying even that could be collusion.
Yeah.
So if you call me and I say, yes, I'm paying a commission and it's X, well, now we have to make sure that the seller, it's like a closing cost credit.
Yeah.
So if the seller's like, well, I'll pay closing costs if the house sits on the market for 2 weeks and we haven't seen any activity, like, do we want to do a price reduction or do we want to offer closing cost credit, et cetera? Well, then now they're saying that's kind of the same thing. Is if I call and the agent says yes, I technically need to call my seller, get permission to share that information with that, because that's ultimately up to the seller. And that's what's so complicated about this stuff is, and each market and each attorney that's reviewing it per MLS also has a different opinion on the whole matter as well. So, and
wild one.
In our market, we're signing a listing writer and it's very clear on how each, if the seller is paying and what they're paying.
Yeah.
We just have a writer but yeah, so
explicitly state it.
Yep.
And then get permission to advertise it and then do so. Simplify. Complexity is the enemy of execution. So if we can tell the customer being the seller, hey, if we want to draw the eyeballs of the people who are representing the buyer, here's how we're going to do it. Because otherwise the buyers lose representation. And I don't think that the media doesn't necessarily do the greatest job. Their job is not real estate. Their job is to get viewers or get viewership. So they're just saying whatever they're getting, and they might be getting it. I know firsthand that people in the business, they might be an anchor for the news. Their neighbor they find out is in real estate. They're just asking them. They're not going and looking up the credentials and the production. They're asking whomever to just get on there and do an interview. So take the information you receive as you're listening to this with a grain of salt. I'm not saying we're the authorities on all matters. I'm just saying we're sharing it objectively. And so then the consumer thinks that there's this negative connotation with buyer representation and doesn't realize they're going to get taken advantage of by the seller's agent. It's like going to court with the attorney, an opposing party has an attorney and you're representing yourself. Like it doesn't make any sense. And I think that in the past, from the research I've done, that buyers fought to have their own representation. And so we're just undoing what at one point in
Right.
time people fought to have.
And it's super confusing because ultimately the buyer's paying the price for the house. So they're taking on the entire price that they're willing to cover their buyer's agent in theory. So it is a very, it's just a slippery slope. But going back just to recap and bring this full circle is, as a buyer's agent, really understanding your value, knowing the data, just like we would when we run comps. It's like, I know the last 5 houses that sold, I know what updates were in there, and you have that data, and then you're going to bring a high level of service. So when we meet with a client, we have contractors, we have staging, we have drone video, like we do a whole process. The same thing for your buyer's presentation is really okay. And as a consumer, understanding that you have the option to interview buyer's agents and then pick somebody who is going to represent you strongly and who is capable of negotiating on your behalf. And, the good buyer's agents will be able to understand and be able to have those conversations around, my goal is to have the seller cover this expense. This is what I charge. Hopefully we can get the seller to cover it. If not, we have the option either not view at that home if that's what you decide, or you would be the one to cover the compensation. But that's just those are literally just communicating. So anything else you want to touch on real quick before we hop off for today?
And you cannot finance closing costs. So at the end of the day, the buyers that don't have the down payments are going to be in a tight position. So the ones who need the housing the most and are in the least strong financial position are essentially going to be in a pretty tough spot if we can't efficiently communicate to the sellers the importance of the willingness to pay a buyer's agent commission.
Right. Well, on our next podcast, we can dig into this a little more. We actually already had a situation with this topic, and I think it would be a good one to talk about on the next episode.
Okay.
All right. Until next time.
Fun hanging with you.
Thanks for tuning in to Invested Souls.
We hope you found our insights valuable and feel inspired to elevate your real estate and relationship goals.
If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. Your feedback means a lot to us.
Follow us on social media for more tips and updates, or visit bradandjamieflanagan.com. And to find out more about our Real Estate Wealth Accelerator, don't hesitate to reach out.
Until next time, keep investing in your future and nurturing your relationships. Thanks for listening to Invested Souls.